Good morning, everyone. The city is experiencing internet issues, which has led to the delay of the start of this public meeting between the city and the police union. Before we get into the details of bargaining, it would be great if everyone could go around the room and introduce themselves. My name is Courtney Washburn. I'm the chief of staff for the city of Boise.
Jamie Sullivan, city attorney.
Biff Jones, and Chief Administrative Officer of our Finance Administration.
Kyle Wills, Police Union. Danny Carter, Police Union.
AJ Veens, Police Union.
Kristen Holmes, HR, Benefits Administrator. Christine Smith, Compensation Analyst.
Justin Harrison, the Senior Budget Analyst, Department of Finance Administration.
Tammy Brooks, Deputy Chief. Adam Collier, City's Outside Legal Counsel.
Thank you, everyone. And just a reminder to please use your microphones so that the recording picks up the audio. And with that, I'll check my memory here. I believe we were going to start out with union proposals. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Courtney. Chief Brooks, I wanted to start off briefly with a little bit of communication and trying to have a good conversation related to where the union positions are and where they stand on this proposal related to the grievance that we're about to draw. We had some concern in our membership since our last meeting. During that last meeting, you guys rejected a proposal related to discipline, and you had said something, and I'm not trying to quote you, so bear with me if I'm a little incorrect, but basically that the department's position is they're going to stick with a 51% standard related to corrective actions on discipline and up to and including firing. That caused some trepidation for our membership because our past administrations, both the last two chiefs, have verbally committed to a higher standard when it comes to life-changing discipline, including firing. So the department verbally at least wanting to start there has some serious concerns for our members. And so I would like to address this real quick as we get ready to draw up this proposal. And I know that Chief Lee and yourself are new to the organization. We appreciate your work towards making the organization better, and we commend the chief at reforming some of the policies related to discipline, but we don't feel like they're quite there enough. And so I just want to express that in the past we've had problems, cultural problems with discipline being weaponized against individuals, etc. And I know that's outside of your privy and hasn't occurred since you've been there, nor since Chief Lee's been there. We have not observed this, but we have seen that through other administrations, and so we have a long history, and we still have the scars to show for it. So we're gonna drop a proposal in on the grievance side. So I just kind of want to, I think our positions are a lot closer than potentially you would think. So let me drop this in. So we have a PowerPoint there we go, that I would like to discuss real quick as we drop this in. Maybe it is. Let me go check. That's how it is.
I don't believe it is.
Yeah, that's how it is. Yeah, that's not. That's, yeah. Sorry about the delay. Okay, I'm gonna drop the proposal in there, then I'm gonna see if I can find the actual PowerPoint. I'll just go through it. It's on my computer. I don't know if I have it on the drive, but what we'd like to talk about is the philosophy of the union and what we believe is important related to discipline, and that we continue to work together towards community trust and engaging and maintaining and building that trust. We feel like we have a long-standing history of having good community interactions. We want to, let you guys know what we stand for: a fair, transparent, ethical, consistent process that provides for accountability and is conducted in an unbiased manner. The department, we believe, should have clear expectations that will help us from making mistakes. And we do commend Chief Lee and yourself for improving those, because they've been a little vague, and that's where we run into some problems. And we want to address that, we understand mistakes can be made, misconduct can occur, and that the expectations of the community and the employees are important when it comes to the complaint process. You talked last time about DOJ best practices, and that's where we went with some of that. And I think that it's important for us to all be on the same page when it comes to best practices. And so we kind of encourage an evolving process, and we feel like there's been some steps made, but we feel like there's additional protections that we need to have in the contract. And just so we're speaking clearly, we understand best practices, especially on the national level, as evidence-based police making. And I think that's kind of where the standard comes from, ICP and CLA and some of that. And so we applaud that, and we think that's a great direction to go. But we also think that the 2009 study that you quoted for best practices is out of date and not really evidence-based. We recently, as you know, the department did a survey study on satisfaction from December of 21 to June of 22. And overwhelmingly, the results were that when people call the police department for assistance, they have an overwhelming satisfied result. And I think that's important to know. And I think that's an important part of our community, and why we have a good, safe community is because it takes two parties to do that. And we want to continue to foster that. But with the DOJ best practice standard, and I'll drop this in here for your references afterwards because I think I found it. The DOJ 2009 best practice standard talks about rights being either in statutory environments or in union contracts. Okay, so what we're asking for is this to be part of the union contract. Okay, and it's I can quote them as saying the rights of officers under law or pursuant to union contracts should be carefully observed. Okay, so even the best practices standard that you quote from last time that the chief used in reforming our policies, which we appreciated, really only involved 12 agencies in the whole country. And we don't feel like that's necessarily the best practice standard. There were some things that came out of that are beneficial. Okay. We did some research, and according to the National Association of Internal Affairs, they viewed that 2009 best practices by saying that it was the cops group that did that. It was remarkable that they could even find a standard out of that because of the lack of consistency between the organizations and the small group that it involved. They did that in a 2022 report that involved 213 organizations. The ICP has a 2014 National Best Practices recommendations. They also recommend that they're either in statutory requirements or in CLAs. And we basically highlight the point that even criminals get notified when they're under investigation. Our current policy does not require officers to be notified that they're under investigation. Anything less than that is going to create a system of distrust. And we have a system of distrust that we appreciate and we recognize that you guys are working to improve. But we don't feel like we're there yet. And until that bridge of trust has surpassed, I don't think policy is a place to put these things. We noticed in our current policies that don't exist is the need for exculpatory information for officers. We feel that that's a national standard. That's something that the ICP recognizes, is that part of the policy should include exculpatory information, just to make sure that all information is sought, whether it clears an officer or not. The ICLP also recommends a copy of any written complaint be provided to the employee. That is not currently in policy. And so one of the hugest things is transparency. And the department does a good job, and I think the city does a good job of being transparent with the public. But when you investigate officers and don't tell them that they're under investigation, that is not transparent. And that has occurred in the past, and even under Chief Lee, not part of the policy. And so we are advocating that the department place some of this stuff into the collective labor agreement. We feel like it is a place that it should be based on the DOJ's best practices, based on ICP's best practices. And as you know from your old organization, that there was a Bill of Rights and officers did have protection statutorily where they worked. And under the Portland Police Bureau, where the chief came from, officers did have their rights in the collective labor agreement. And so what we're proposing is that under Section F, grievance disciplinary action, that disciplinary action or corrective action, which results in 2 or more days off without pay or demotion or firing of a member, shall be for just cause. That is a standard that is used in administrative law when it comes to property rights and due process. We feel like having it in the CLA is an appropriate place. We don't feel like 51% will meet muster when it comes to administrative law, and then we're just going to be spinning our wheels with legal battles and possibly, if we can, if the standard isn't high enough, getting the officer's job back after a lengthy expense to the city. I'm sure that yourself or the chief, if their job was in jeopardy, would hope that it would be for reasonable 51%. I know that I personally would be. But the preponderance of evidence standard is not sufficient for us. So we're proposing this. We're not trying to interfere with any ongoing investigations that are underway, any pending disciplines that are about to occur or under considerations. But we do feel like this is a very critical issue for our members, that at least we have a just cause as the standard for substantial discipline, 2 days off or more. So we're affecting people's livelihoods and or demoting them and or firing them. And that we would ask that the department provide written notification in a reasonable amount of time. Whatever that is, we will let you determine that. But we would like reasonable amount of time. We would like to be notified in writing. So I'll drop this into the box and you can use it as a reference. I'm not sure 100% that it is the actual one that I intended, but it may have some errors in there, but it has references in there. And so we would really like to open that discussion. I don't know if you're prepared to have a discussion about that, Chief Brooks, but it is important, and we want you to know that, you know, we do feel that transparency is important to the city, but also to its members. We do understand that trust is important. You know, we want to maintain that, but we want to do it in a fair practice, and we want some protections related to that.
I just have a couple of questions. When you refer to the Bill of Rights associated with the state of Oregon, California, is that housed in state statute?
So in Portland, it's part of their collective labor agreement, and there's a copy of it that's going to be in the PowerPoint that actually states what the way they have it written, but basically discipline as they define it is for just cause. And we looked at least back to 2016. So both of them.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Apparently, we are noticed for YouTube, but we're on Zoom, so only the link has to change. I just wanted to stop you.
Okay.
I will go talk to IT about changing.
You just have to start all over.
Can do. We can actually.
Oh, this whole day is off. You're also highly efficient, so if we get a whole hour, we might be able to accomplish it.
We're all anticipating that. I was ready to.
Thanks everybody for your patience. I think the best way to restart is to indicate we were talking about the union proposal associated with disciplinary action. And I believe I asked the question, was the reference to the police bill of rights in the state of Oregon and California associated with state statute? And I believe you were in the middle of explaining the answer.
So in California, it's a statutory regulation. I can't speak to Oregon as a general rule. However, the Portland Police Bureau, their association collective labor agreement does contain it, so that perhaps there's state regulations also. And so the Portland one is no discipline without just cause.
And I think my other questions are all kind of in a theme, I think, is starting to emerge from our other bargaining meetings, which is the sense that you all are extremely concerned about fair and transparent treatment because of challenges of the past. So you're correct in that we have a disadvantage in not understanding those. So as we continue to work through this, I think the city side is really geared towards the police department of the future. And you all seem to be bringing a bunch of stuff that we don't quite understand, I'll call it stuff. I think some of the words has been weaponizing discipline or a sense of distrust in the system. And so
I'm going to ignore that. And so if you could just talk to us more about kind of that, because this isn't the only place those issues have been raised.
I'm going to see if the feedback is gone. See if that helps at all. It does not. Test.
There you go. Go for it.
We'll see how long that lasts. Yeah, so we've had members who have been disciplined for actions and other members who have done the same actions and not been disciplined. We have had investigations, specifically, I can remember an inquiry that occurred in June, was not investigated until November, and then turned into an investigation which ended at the end of June or the beginning of July. And so we understand that there are complications that can occur from investigations, getting a hold of witnesses and those kinds of things. And I think that we have a reasonable approach to that, and we understand those things. But we don't feel like it's fair to be under investigation for a month or 2 months without even being notified. It just seems like a unjust place for our members to have to operate. And I know the department, you know, their overall wellness of the officers is in their mind. And, you know, me not knowing that an investigation is going on, or maybe hearing rumor from people that I'm under investigation, but not really being told what that is about, can be very, create a lot of angst and anguish and mental stress for our officers. I think most officers have good conduct. You know, sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes that conduct needs to be corrected. But as a general rule, I think the city is fortunate to hire good people, train people well, and work well with the community. And I think we don't have a lot of problems that other capital cities have. And I think that comes from having quality officers. Well, all we're asking for is that, you know, if you're going to impose a fine, a substantial fine, a week off without pay, several $1,000s, you're going to demote somebody, they're going to lose money, you're going to fire somebody, then we have a fair standard that goes by. And I just think that general complaints of verbal stuff, you know, was it rude, was it not? We don't mind that that's a 51% kind of deal, but we're talking about substantial discipline where people have, you know, property interests, We just feel that we need to bolster our due process. And so we have had a history, and I know Chief Brooks spoke to that, and we appreciate them working on that issue. The intake process, Chief Lee has tried to fix because in the past, they have gone to internal affairs investigations for all types of complaints, very small complaints that should be handled by supervisors. And Chief Lee has redirected that, and Chief Brooks, not to leave you short there, you guys have redirected that to a more appropriate level, and that has started a better process. We just feel like written notification and having protection of at least just cause in a contract gives our people a fair look at stuff. We spoke last time with Jamie, had some questions about our grievance process. We don't just protect people because they're in the union, and even if they're in the wrong, they're in the wrong, and we're willing to say you're in the wrong, and we're not going to fight a legal battle or grievance over that. So historically, we have had at least 2 chiefs out of the last 3 that have had some questionable issues when it comes to their personnel treatment. And so, not to disparage Chief Lee or Chief Brooks in any kind of way, I'm sure they're going to do a fabulous job. It's just, we still have the scars from past administrations, and that it is a trusting thing, and the organization is an entity, and it's a relationship. And so you've come here, you're going to work here for a few years. People at this table work here for 25 or 30 years. And so I've worked for 11 chiefs in my career. Chiefs come and go, some of them good, some of them great, some of them in between. And so we want some lasting protections. So if the city administration changes, and we support the city administration, or our department administration changes, that the next follow-on people, we don't have to go back to square one or being mistreated and have issues. And so without getting into personnel issues as far as how these things have played out, we just feel as a group that there's a lack of trust. It may not be because of you currently, Chief Brooks or Chief Lee, but we still have that distrust. And just like any relationship, it takes time to build that back. And I think this is the first step that we could do to help build that back. And I think that we both have the same things in mind. We think that having a complaint process that's fair and transparent is important for the citizens. We also think it's important for our members. And if we have trust with the citizens, but we don't have trust within the organization, it's not going to play out well either. And so that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it helps me understand. So if I were to say that the union is proposing the notification process as part of an effort to be transparent and fair and equalized treatment, but it's not the whole thing, right? Notification isn't magic. It's not going to address what I think you referred to as unequal treatment, right? I'm just trying to make sure.
That is correct. I think it's a component of fairness and transparency, like you mentioned. It does not necessarily address the fair treatment side of it. We hope that just cause and having a fair, decent standard would address that, and especially for more substantial discipline.
Did anybody else have any questions?
I was just wondering if does the current policy provide a just cause standard or any sort of standard for discipline?
The current policy is the preponderance, which is the 51. In past administrations, last week I spoke to one of the former captains that was over internal affairs, and during his tenure, he agreed that they would have a higher standard for greater discipline. And so I think anytime you're looking at greater discipline, you should look to the facts and the finding of those and have a good standard, not a 51% yes, 49% no standard.
I just have one quick question. You had indicated this has been a concern for at least the last 2 chiefs, so 10, 15 years. Bear with me on dates.
So I didn't say the last 2 chief, I said two out of the last 3.
Okay.
So we had a great relationship with Chief Masterson. And so he was here for an extended period of time. But prior to that, and then prior to Chief Lee's administration.
So how many years has this been a concern for the union? Roughly,
Well, Chief Lee Chief Pierce worked here when Mayor Coles was the mayor and Susan McMurray was the city attorney, and we had that whole incident. So it was during that same genre.
okay, so
And then-
20
then-
plus years.
About 17, 18-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. So on and off. And so that's where we stand is we can have that a chief, and we can have some distrust, we can have some mistreatment, we can have a good chief, and then that chief goes away. And then we could potentially get stuck with somebody who mistreats us. And so we want a little protection that way.
My follow-up question to that is, has the union ever submitted this proposal and passed negotiations during that time period?
I personally, none of us sitting here at this table negotiated past negotiations. I can tell you that discipline has been brought up. I don't know specifics on that. Additionally, policy is continuously changing. So we just had a policy revision which improved some of those things for us. We just feel like it didn't go far enough. So over the course of time, policy has not been static, especially in the course of 20 years. And so I can't speak to 100% what exactly, but I know that discipline has always, or in the past on some of the contracts has come up. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Denny, I don't have any questions for you. I'll just affirm for you that the current administration wants what the union wants, and a fair and transparent objective process throughout this. I think the change to our current policy and how that process works is demonstrative of that. So I don't have any questions for this, but I will take this under submission and look at what you guys proposed.
I appreciate it. Thank you. So we dropped in a proposal related to the PHP and the HRA VIVA. And essentially some of it is a language cleanup. The changes are in red. And the first part of that has to do with the language change cleanup just from the dates and the years, updating it from the last contract going forward. And then we would ask that, well, I shouldn't say we would ask. We understand that health insurance costs are continuing to go up, and that causes issues for us. So we would ask for our members to start contributing into that post-employment health plan of 0.5% per year based on a biweekly draw, since we're going that direction on some of the other leave issues, and that the city in year 2 of this contract would add another 0.5%, which would equal a total of 2.5% for the package in the end of year 2. And so we feel it's an important issue, and that's why we're asking our members to contribute. And we're asking the city to also increase that a little bit and to help our members. The real goal is keeping pace with those rising costs so our officers can retire on time instead of having to work an extended period of time because they can't afford the health care and that gap between retirement and Medicare at 65. And so this proposal would look to increase that and an equal contribution between the union members and the city, with the city starting in year 2 and the union members starting in year 1.
If there aren't any questions, what the city has been doing is just running the financial impact of all economic related proposals and then looking at them at one piece. But I don't think we have any further questions on this one.
Yeah, and I think, as we discussed last time, I think Biff's and Kristen's and Justin, financial wizardry is where to put that, and we'll get that back, and we'll see where that falls on all our compensation stuff. But I think that's the direction we're going for all of our compensatory stuff today.
Well, and just as we work through this process, we've got, I think our next meeting is pretty quick. So the more of these we can get out to get an estimate from our folks to see how soon they can turn this stuff around, I think the better.
Okay, we dropped in a proposal related to sergeant administrative time. Changes are in red. The first part of that is a cleanup on some of the language. And essentially, in previous contracts, sergeants get 2 hours of overtime per week to accomplish their administrative duties, handle phone calls off duty, et cetera. The high volume sergeants that are really on call as a regular basis and the field calls all hours of the night, we added some members that were getting these things that weren't in the contract, and we added some newer positions, for example, like the drone position. So some of those are additions and to it. And we also had a issue where some guys were getting an hour and some guys were getting an additional hour and additional 2 hours. So some were getting 3, some were getting 4. We changed that to all of the people that are responsible for sending out resources in the middle of the night or on the weekends would get the 2 hours. So it's a change in that regard.
I think I just have a quick question. How does this relate to the, I think we were calling it a different designation for corporals? I can't remember what we were, the designation we were using, master corporal, I can't remember, associated with the sergeants. I think in that discussion, my understanding is the expectation was the administrative responsibilities would lessen for sergeants. So I'm just wondering how you see those two interact.
So primarily, these are resources, detectives, K-9 units, SWAT team members that deal with calls and meetings and those kinds of things on the fly. The way probably the corporal thing will work out is that's probably going to be more related to patrol, and that will alleviate some of the responsibilities, and depending on how the department defines their duties and responsibilities. That may change, but I don't foresee, and I don't know if the department foresees, that corporals would necessarily have to do off-duty or personal time work. So this is really so that in the middle of the night when the fire department says, and I hate to use that term, but hey, we need a drone because ours isn't available for this big fire, then we would have to wake up a sergeant and say, hey, we need a drone out here at this big fire. And then they have to call somebody and try to figure out what's going on and get that resource out there for the public. And so this is specifically related to handling additional calls from their supervisors or regarding a variety of member issues, and taking calls in the middle of the night about whether they should send out a detective or whether the SWAT team needs to go out, et cetera. And so this group in the red, which is the second group, had been broken into 2 groups. So typically, if patrol ends up needing a narcotics detective at 10 at night or 11 at night, they called the on-call sergeant, which is a narcotics sergeant, and then he would call out an on-call detective or make the determination that it's not something they need to send somebody out for in the middle of the night. And so the administrative pay has been based in the past on those inconveniences and compensating them for that. And some of those groups, like the violent crimes unit, the persons crimes unit sergeant, they field calls daily. And so it's a substantial burden to them. And so this portion of that contract historically has dealt with that, but we had just divided it into some of them get 1 and some of them get 2. And then we've expanded the organization to include things like drones and crash reconstruction and some of those things that are now privy to some of the sergeant's responsibilities for coming out in the middle of the night. So that's really what that portion deals with.
So Denny, can you help me understand a couple things?
Yeah.
So the example you just used a sergeant in the middle of the night, not on duty, gets a call, is that sergeant also receiving on-call pay?
Yeah, currently they do. And it's more than that. I'm sure it's very similar to your job where you get a lot of phone calls all across the board and have to deal with stuff. And so in the past, we have compensated our sergeants with these administrative pays. And so there is some of these members, not all of them are on call. So negotiations is not on call, EOD is not on call. Community outreach guys are not on call. Crash reconstruction is, property is, drones are not, school resources are. So for those people, that would be their on-call pay, so to speak. And so for the other ones, it's just for the volume is how it's been, I guess.
And actually, this is their on-call pay.
Oh, that is their on-call?
Yes, they get on call, but it's this.
Okay. Go ahead. Bill.
Yeah, just to clarify, chief, they receive on-call pay. This is their on-call pay. This is essentially the same. This administrative pay is the on-call pay for them.
Got it.
They
Okay.
don't have anything in addition to.
That's where I was
this.
getting a bit confused and trying to understand processes, how it works. Because the other thing that I just wanted to clarify and ensure that I understood correctly was this language says that these positions are authorized an additional, under the proposal, 2 hours of overtime per week. And I guess I just want to clarify, is that if those services are used, they're entitled if they actually work it, or is the expectation that regardless of whether they receive any additional calls or anything, that they're entitled to 2 hours, whether they do anything for that or not? Am I making sense when I say that?
Yeah, and so that they are entitled to that every week. That is their on-call pay, what they get for being on call, so to speak. And so in the past contract, those hours were divided. So the real problem we had is they were divided weird. Some of them were getting one, some of them were getting compensated in two. So all sergeants get 2 hours for their administrative duties. Some sergeants were getting an hour and some were getting a two hours. And so what we did was we changed it from 1 and 2 to 2. And we added some people that were currently added to that, even though they weren't in the contract. And so as the department has grown, some people were left out verbally or the written contract, but were already receiving this or already getting paid for this based on approvals through their supervisors. And so really what we did was we switched it so everybody's equal that is going to be getting calls or that is on call, so to speak, to 2 hours. And from 1 to 2 and somewhere in 2. I guess I'm trying to got a little tongue tied there, but does that make sense?
I think so. So this proposal is basically any sergeant in these positions will receive 4 hours of overtime every pay period.
That is correct. So normally all sergeants receive 2 hours a week. That's for their administrative sections. And then in part 2 of that, where the red is the following sergeants. So all of those sergeants are going to get 2 hours, which has been divided up into either 1 hour or 2 hour for most of those groups. However, we did add a couple of groups to it that did not previously have this, like drone, reconstruction, DRE, et cetera.
And so if a sergeant in one of these categories has to do more than 4 hours of work in that pay period, are they putting in for additional time on top of that? Or is the expectation this 4 hours per pay period will cover the expense, whether they put in 0 hours during that pay period or whether they put in 10 hours per?
The expectation is that 4 hours covers it.
Okay.
What's Bandit?
That is the narcotics unit, the narcotics task force.
Okay, is that a
It's an
acronym?
acronym for the
Okay, thank you.
Boise Area Narcotics Drug Interdiction Task Force, is I think what it stands for.
I don't have any additional questions on that. Thank you.
Yeah, one question that I've gotten, this is just principally, I'm just thinking back to why the current language is structured how it is. And I suspect it may be due to the operationally the incidence of getting called back. So I'd be interested to hear from the union, do you have any concerns about the different sergeants under your proposal that might perceive that their compensation is going to be disproportionate with the effort that they're putting forward? Does that make sense? So if I'm in a particular unit that's getting called back
Sure.
regularly versus somebody that's in assignment that isn't, is that going to create either?
So currently, we
Or-
have this
yeah.
system and everybody gets two, that's a sergeant. And then the people that are technically really, we'll call it on call, even though it's not really on call, get additional hours. And so I think we always pull our, it's a very democratic thing. And, the membership, tells us the directions to go and then we make our discussions related to them. And so, when we prepared for this, we did not have that brought to our attention. We haven't had it brought to our attention. And I think it really bears down to, those supervisors are doing additional duties and have additional responsibilities, extra work, extra liability. And so, I think the sergeants who don't receive that know that, hey, those guys are doing more than I'm doing, so they're being compensated in a greater fashion. And I think that that's understandable and standard. I don't think we have any issues. We haven't had any issues with it.
Okay, thank you. And then quick question for Kristen. We can take this offline too. So I heard also that there are those in the contract that are receiving this benefit, those that are receiving this benefit that aren't in the contract. Do you have insight on the payroll side? Are we going to be able to get our hands on that, or do we need to ask the union for a list of who is and isn't currently receiving that?
I'm pretty sure we're gonna have to ask for all that to get it, so I can get it over to my team.
Okay, so let us work on the back end. If we have additional information we need from you, we'll get back to you. But
Yeah, we can provide that. Like
Okay.
one of the members was in a previous MOU, which we memorialized this one. One of the members is a new position. And so we can definitely line that out for you. We dropped on a proposal for on-call for non-sergeants, so your traditional members and detectives. And basically, it cleans up some of the language during this and puts us to a little better standard. Currently, our detectives get an hour of regular time every day of the week. And we're asking to increase that to an hour of overtime Monday through Friday and 2 hours for the Saturday and Sunday, which is an equal of 9 hours per week for those involved in the Criminal Investigations Division, which is our detective group. We do have it listed below who those members are. And we're asking to kind of bring that up a little bit. Currently, Ada County has this system. So detectives at Ada County receive an hour every day, Monday through Friday, and 2 hours of overtime for being on call during the weekends. And we're asking to get on parity with them. We're also asking for certain holidays to fall, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and 4th of July, receive a 2-hour overtime rate instead of an hour overtime rate if they don't fall on the weekends. Just for the inconvenience of having to leave your family at Christmas and Thanksgiving or 4th of July. Then we talked about, we're asking for members of the patrol division and COD division, so essentially our uniform groups. With the civil disorder and disorder that has happened in the last few years, we've been placing members on standby status. We want to memorialize that, and we want to define what that is, and we want to compensate members for that. So what we're asking for is if it's a civil disorder or emergency that occurs, and we're placing people on standby before their shift. So if I came in worked at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the department needed me, put me on emergency status, hey, we need you to be available to come in before your shift, that we would be compensated with it for 2 hours of being put on standby status. That occurred a lot in the last 2 years. And members are more than willing to be ready, but it also eats into their personal time and they're unable to do the things they do before shift. You can't go on runs or get their haircut or do other errands because they have to be available for the department. Typically, those types of events are things that are pre-planned and foreseen, and the organization has done a good job of dealing with that, I believe. And so it's stuff that they know is coming, and then they're placing people on standby. They don't always get called in, but they're waiting to be able to be called in. And so we're really talking about, civil disorder and any kind of emergency that they would be paid for on call or for standby status when they're placed on that by their supervisors. And then we ask to add to the definition section what that standby status is. And we're specifically talking about those types of incidences, not unforeseen incidences of, an emergency happened. There was, something catastrophic that happened, earthquake or something weird like that, that could happen. We're just talking about, hey, there's a pre-planned event. We need you to be ready to come in case we have to use all our on-duty personnel for other issues to come in and handle calls. And so we're looking for compensation on that.
Just a quick question. When you refer to civil disorder or other emergency, do you foresee that as being defined by the chief as opposed to a formal declaration by the mayor?
I think so, yes. I think the department can manage that. And, I think by placing some kind of compensation, it also holds them accountable because there's a cost to it. And so when they need to do it, they'll do it. And when they are on the fence, they probably won't because it's going to cost the city some money. And so we just don't want to randomly abuse that. And I think having a compensation for that will help that.
And I just have a question. Is there a reason that CID is not part of that? Is CID not subject to the call in or standby pay for that?
So I think we're just basing on what's happened in the last 2 years. So a couple of things. Most of the detectives work an 8 to 5 job. So they're not being asked to be on standby. They're already at work. Right. And if we need to pull them, during this period of time, I worked in the detective group. And, when we had those kinds of incidences, we were said, hey, bring a uniform. If we need you, we're going to pull you out of your detective job and put you into that. What we're really looking for is if I'm coming in at 3 and you're like, hey, I need you to be ready to come in anytime between 8 and 3. And now I put my time off on hold, that we should be compensated for it. And so I think it mostly applies to shift schedule, uniform personnel versus say CID. And so that's kind of where our thought process is on it, if that helps.
No, I was just thinking if there was a weekend event or something that wouldn't normally be under CID normal operating. So the people in patrol are going to be compensated differently than the people in CID.
Yeah, we're looking to do it differently. And I think historically, the way the department's handled that is, like I said, having come from Detective Bureau, hey, we need 5 of you guys to work Saturday for this event. And we're told ahead of time. And so we can make scheduling arrangements. Usually the standby thing is at night, I'm working today, I'm getting ready to go home. And you're like, hey, we're going to need you to be ready tomorrow because we have this disorder potential issue. And so that's where we're looking with that. We're asking for a shift differential change in compensation. We'd like to create a weekend shift differential of 0.5%. And we define the weekend as 2 contiguously scheduled days of either a day swing or night shift, which occur on a Saturday or a Sunday, and or a scheduled shift of Friday, Saturday for night and swing teams. The theory being that, we want to incentivize having to give up your weekend. And that way we can keep senior people on there. Additionally, we ask that the swing shift differential goes up by 1/3%, from 3% to 3.33%. And clean some language related to the longevity in hazard pay, which hazard pay has been removed, and longevity still exists. But I think as we're working through that pay schedule, we're gonna see a difference in that. So we're removing that from the language. Just in the notes, that affects, 1 day shift, 1 swing shift, 2 night shifts, and 1 overlap team, and some airport and maybe potentially BSU person or 2, just to give it some relevance. I'm not sure if there's questions on that.
Doesn't look like it.
Okay.
Hey, if I may,
Yes.
just really quickly, I just want to make sure I'm grabbing these so we don't have to have dialogue later. So the weekend shift differential pay of 0.5%, that's new. There's no existing
Correct.
benefit there. And then the other piece, the enhancement from 3% to 3.33, it would still apply to the same population that's getting it now.
Correct.
Great. That's
It's
all.
just
I
a
have.
1/3% increase.
Thank you.
I think, would you mind if we took a quick 5 or 10 minute break?
Nope. Would you like 5 or 10 minutes?
Let's do 10.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, we're all back and my assumption is the union has more proposals.
That is correct. So we'd like to talk about our pay package, our pay compensation package, which includes a little bit of a rework of that schedule that Chief Brooks counter proposed.
Is this proposal 5?
It's proposal
Okay,
5.
thank you.
And I dropped in an Excel spreadsheet, but I want to have a conversation and look at the compensation package that we're asking for. Currently we're struggling in the recruiting and some of the retention, which I'm sure the chief and deputy chief has made the city aware of, and that we're constantly trying to stay on the right side of that, for lack of a better terms. In the last year or so, we've lost several people to Ada County Sheriff's Department. We have people that are in process with Meridian Police Department. And we additionally have people that are looking potentially to go to Meridian. And I think that we can get in the weeds on that, but I think everybody's kind of on the same page that we have fallen behind on wages to local agencies in the Treasure Valley. And as a result, people are leaving. And historically, the police department, at least in the 26 years I've been here, we've always been the recipient of people lateraling to us. We've never had anybody leave where we're at. And so perspective wise, although Meridian is not necessarily a traditional comparable city, we need to keep in mind that I can do the same job, work less hard. My spouse does not have to change her job. My kids don't have to change schools. I don't have to sell my house and move, which is always fun. I can literally just drive 4 miles away from where I'm starting my work to start in a new place. And so these are the issues that we're battling. So I'll let you guys look at the pay schedule that we tweaked. We left kind of, some of those columns are not quite working out. We left the scheduling as you proposed, Chief Brooks. We have not added anything into corporal because we really haven't come to a full agreement on that and what that looks like. I think you had 5 steps for the sergeants. We lowered that to 3 steps. And really when we came up with these numbers, we couldn't really come up with a percentage like traditionally we would do because there's a shift. And so we were compressing our pay scale and changing the longevity and how that's been written. And so what we tried to formulate was really comparison to Meridian pay scale that starts in October of 23, which I have an Excel spreadsheet attached with the comparisons, which we'll talk about. And then go through and say, hey, we have a lot of responsibilities. We have a lot, it's a different place to work. The volume of work is substantial. As the chief knows, and Chief Washburn knows that we're constantly battling right now. I think we're sitting about 30 officers short of our full-time employee rate. That number has floated between 50 and 25 and continues to be an issue for us. I know that Meridian, I recently talked to their background investigator. He's a sergeant. And 2 months ago, he told me that they had approved 60 laterals that they would take to work at Meridian Police Department, that they were just trying to sort through that and figure out who was hired. That is a substantially greater number than that we are receiving currently. And we're getting to the point of potentially having a critical staffing issue. And we feel like the number one cause behind that is our pay. When you can do the same job in the same place and work less hard, it's hard to compete with that. This pay scale.
Denny, are you accusing Meridian of working less hard?
It's not so much of an accusal.
I just wanted to make
It's not
sure
so
I
much of an
got that.
accusal as a factual statement. So I have many friends that work there, and I'm just stating a true fact.
I just needed to hear it again.
Okay.
Do you have the compensation information associated with Meridian for the police department
So when their pay or their
and their
total,
benefits? Because, yeah.
we know that our benefits are higher. We know that we have better benefits. And, you know, we appreciate that and we applaud that. And we know that that comes into play. But really, for most of the laterals that are looking to come here either within the state or from other states, the benefit package is it's a bonus. And so if things are fairly equal, that benefit package is going to rule the day. But if you're making $8 less an hour at one place, it's really hard for officers or members to not want to leave or to come here versus there. That is pretty consistent. Now, I will also say that, you know, keeping in mind that on the administrative side, the chief and the deputy chief side, you know, their pay rate is the highest in the state and they have good benefit packages. And so we have always had to sacrifice pay for some of that benefit package. And it's put us where we're at now. I mean, I can honestly say from a state agency side, we have never received a lateral that went back to where they came from or left the Boise Police Department into the last year and a half. And so obviously the cost of living, everybody's aware of, and we're not arguing cost of living stuff. And so what we tried to do was with this shift in compression and battling what Meridian makes is where we kind of came up with those year one numbers. And we're trying to make it so that it's more attractive for the deputy chief and the chief to get quality people in here. And, you know, ultimately our goal is, I think the reason that Boise is a good, safe community and we have a good relationship is because we've hired good people with good character and they've stayed here. Most of our members come to work here and they work here for 20 plus years. They don't leave typically up until recently. So if you want to look at the other document I dropped in there, which is the spreadsheet involving just the pay, and I understand where we're going with the compensation stuff. So if you look at that, just to explain that, year one pay, this is for 2023, and this is our current pay scale for us. They have intermediate, advanced, and master pays. Year one, they start off at 36. We start off at 27.36. And so in that far right column is the difference in Boise Police Department dollars. And so you can see how all but 2 years, the second year and our 20th year, so in the second year, we actually make 70 cents more an hour than them. But as you look down that list, it's a pretty substantial deviation, all the way up to $8 for supervisors. And so when we came up with our compensation pay package side, we tried to play this paradigm shift with compressing it, our pay scale, and changing it, and then trying to ensure that we can get people, that we can get the best candidates, that Meridian's not beating us for candidates, and that Ada County's not beating us for candidates. And so we came up with the year one numbers based on those. And we're trying to find a place where we could recruit people, retain people, and sort of pay our people what we feel like they're worth. So if you look in that column H where it has those longevities, that's included in that 4097 number. So like if you go to year 5, where it shows our pay at 4097, that includes that 5%, but those are the percentages that we have. And so as we go back and forth with the pay that we're requesting, we're also requesting percentage increase for post certifications, which kind of alleviates some of that longevity. And so on our Appendix A presentation, you can see that if a person has an intermediate post, it would be an additional 0.75%. An advanced would be 1.25%, and a master would be 2%, which comes down to training and education. At the bottom, Chief, we tried to leave you some discretion. We understand that it's important to be able to bring in laterals commensurate with their skills and training and experiences. And This kind of mirrors the current system that Meridian has with their pay. And so they're bringing laterals in at a variety of levels. What we would advocate is that if you have 8 years or greater, that you could bring them in at step E, which is a fairly substantial pay for them. And then for year 2, we actually just went off of year 1 and added a percentage, which is listed at the top there. And we would go from there. I do want to drop in a photographic copy of their budget for their police officer pay scale. So if you give me a minute, I will put that in there. Yes.
I'm a little lost in these numbers, which is fine, but so essentially you're currently only proposing an increase of the first year of the contract of 6.5 per uniform and 3% of sergeants. Is that correct? Do you have a proposal for the second year of the?
That is the second year. The first year on that. Sorry. The first year would be starting October 1st of 2022, which that would be the first year. And then the second column is that 6.5 increase. So the first column, which is the negotiated hourly rate for the year 1 of the contract, is the numbers that we're asking. It's not associated with a percentage because when we combined the pay scale and compressed it, the percentages waive. And so it's not a consistent percentage because, for example, we don't have a 4-year pay. We have a 3-year pay and a 5-year pay. And so I couldn't say, give me a percentage on top of that because it's new pay. And so we condensed it, which will be a paradigm shift for us. And then, so when I evaluated those numbers, when we evaluated those numbers, what we did was we basically looked at Meridian scale, we looked at our current scale, we compressed it, and then tried to come up with numbers for each of those steps. And then for year 2, we just asked for that 6.5% off of or on top of the year 1. So it would be a second year increase of 6.5.
Okay. And then just so I'm understanding this correctly, so the comparables you're using in this space are strictly Meridian. So you didn't look at anyone else. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And, Boise is a unique city in a sense that, our population, our resident population is one thing, but our non-resident population swells and affects services. And so really, we're not trying to get paid what, Madison, Wisconsin gets paid. We feel like in the Treasure Valley, this is a competitive wage that will make laterals want to come to Boise. It'll retain our current employees and provide for a good working wage for our members. And so we did not really go out and explore a lot of comparables because we feel like it's unique with the economy and the housing market. So we just said, hey, why are we losing guys to Meridian? Why are we losing guys to Ada County? Why are we not winning the recruiting battle? And we feel like it comes down to the pay. And we do feel like the benefits package is important that we do have, which is better than Meridian's, but that it doesn't weigh in as heavy as we would think it would be. And we feel like we have to have a competitive rate to stay viable with our personnel staff and our employee satisfaction.
Just as a side note, the general employees are experiencing this, our new employees, it appears to be generational. It used to be the benefits package weighed in on people's career selections, and now it appears to feel so far off that people would just like the money now. I assume it's what we're looking at as well.
Yeah, we experienced some of that also. Let me drop that picture in there from the contract. And it's just a screenshot from their city website. And so we, like I said, we left the corporal section blank because we haven't really come to a full agreement on that, and we don't really know what that looks like. We do have a supervisor's addition of 0.5% for having a supervisor certificate. And obviously, Chief, if laterals come and they have those certificates from other states, all they have to do is produce them and they can be eligible. So as you review that, keep that in mind that in the state of Idaho, they accept other states' certificates. You probably already know that, but just in case. And so if I came here and I had an advance, I would get that percentage for what our ask is. I'm looking to you, Biff.
Yeah, so I really appreciate both the format and how this information is put together. I really think it puts us in a strong position to help cost out what the budget implications might be. I am curious, do you happen to know with the city of Meridian and their pay structure for that corporal rank, how they define the corporal? Do they have supervisory responsibilities as we've tentatively discussed around this table?
Yeah, so Meridian currently, their corporals are supervisors and they're attested supervisory position in a traditional law enforcement manner. And if you go to the picture, you'll see that they're actually on there. That pay scale from their budgetary website goes from the chief all the way down to the newest officers and has their history on there of their past pays and what they will be getting in October of 23.
Great. Yeah, that's the only question I have at this time. I think, just taking this data, running it through our models, we can come back with a budget implication.
Sounds good. If there's no additional questions, I'll add another proposal. So we added proposal 6, which has to do with incentive pays. Essentially, we added an incentive. So when the department came to the union and asked to do the MOU for FTO, the basic concept was, hey, we want to convert the way this is done, and we would like to provide a specialty incentive of 5%, which has been memorialized from the MOU. And so our understanding from the department side was, hey, if you're doing extra duties, you have extra responsibilities, you have extra leadership, you have extra liability, you have extra hazards, you should be compensated for that over people that are not doing those kinds of things. So with that in mind, we added a 2% incentive for our detective bureau, for the general detectives, and for the higher liability, the persons detectives and the violent crimes, we're requesting a 3% increase for their incentive. We also asked for a 1% for our special operations group, which includes explosive ordinances, crisis negotiation, or disorderly liaison officers. I understand they're doing both roles, and the special operations unit, which is traditionally called SWAT, of a 1%. And keeping in mind what the department's philosophy on that is the same, is why we put this in here. Canine officers, we're asking for 1% pay rate for canine officers and a 1% rate for motor officers. For uniform officers, we're asking for a 0.5% for a body camera recording system. Uniform members who are required to wear that on a daily basis would get 0.5%. And members who are trained in crisis intervention training and dealing with mental health, we're asking for a 0.5% for those officers.
I just have a clarifying question. Just so I understand this. So the selected or assigned duties here, do they infer a training element to these, or is this just an assignment? So is there some sort of increased training these officers need to do to hold these positions, or is this just the units in which they're assigned?
So there is additional training related to all of those. So any of the investigative units are required to, as they go through that process, update their training to be more specialized into the investigations. Depending on the assignment, it's a variety of things, cell phone related training on how to do cell phone work, how to write search warrants, conduct interviews, et cetera. And so on the detective group, depending on where they're at, there's a lot of specialized training. The narcotics guys have a lot of specialized training. The special victims unit, they deal with internet crimes against children and all the sex crimes. There's a high amount of training that is required. And so additionally, with that, there's a high liability. The special operations group, there's an immense amount of training that goes into those. I think that's pretty commonly understood. Canines, the same thing. It's a very hazardous, high liability job. They do an enormous amount of training, and the same with the motor unit. So all of these are very high liability, high hazard, high responsibility, members of our organization that are doing a large volume of work and with specialized training and education. And so we feel that it's equivalent to what we're asking for.
Denny, I have a question. How does the union equate or view the difference between this type of incentive pay for these specialty assignments and, say, the sergeant admin time? Is there, with the sergeants, if they're doing these responsibilities, would it be better served to provide an incentive pay versus a set number of hours of overtime, or do you guys see that completely different?
So this incentive would be for members, sworn officers, non for the sergeants. The sergeants are covered under the administration section that we already had talked about. So we approached them and we said, hey, we're going to go this direction in this area. Do you want to go that direction in that area? They actually decided as a group that they would rather leave it the way it is with some slight tweaks than go to a percentage. And so that was our determining factor.
All right, thank you.
And a clarifying question from my perspective, DC Brooks, do you have enough knowledge about all of these assignments, how they split out across the population to help us get the right positions in the right categories, or do we need any follow-up from the union to help us sort that out as we cost?
No, I have that.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so the union dropped in a proposal for benefits on the sick leave side. And we're asking to go from 8 hours of accrual a month, which is less than a day, to a 10-hour standard, which would be a day. Bear in mind that this hasn't been changed in at least 26 years. We've been that way. A lot of organizations, both civilian and non-civilian, get a day. And then we're asking for an uptick in the buy down at retirement to go to 75% from 60%. So previously we would get 60% of the baseline 600 hours and then 75% of anything on top of that 600 hours. We're requesting that we get the purchase buy down of 75% at retirement. And if there's no questions, I will drop in the next proposal. The next proposal deals with the Special Operations or SWAT unit workout time bank. And I'll go into a little bit of history here with how that's played out for the organization.
Hey, Denny, I apologize. I'm a
You're
little
good.
slow on this one. I was just reading the language, thinking through questions. Can I go back to the sick leave?
Absolutely.
Real quick? Yes, I see. And you might have said it. I was just trying to process. The language is struck out in that under the wellness incentive plan, that payment is attributable to hours in excess of 600 accumulated at that particular point in time. So how would it be determined which hours apply to that 75% conversion? Is it at the member's discretion or?
No, so what we're asking for is that at retirement, all of the sick leave hours in a member's bank would be converted at the 75% rate. So currently the way it is the first 600 hours at retirement is converted at 60%. And then the remaining hours are converted at 75%. So if we had 650 hours, 600 would go at 60 and the other 50 would go at 75. We're asking for all of the hours.
Okay, I'm clear. Thank you.
Okay.
You'll go ahead and move on. Apologize for the
Well,
interruption.
no worries at all. Okay, so back to the SOU bank. So historically, about 28 years ago, the union won a grievance related to the workout time by the SWAT team, and they were awarded by the hearing officer that the time would go into comp time. So over the course of time and in 2015, the organization asked to put that into a separate bank and asked for it to be flex time. The members of the SWAT team, of which I was the team leader, decided not to hold them to the comp time issue, that it seemed fair to put into administrative time, which is flex time. However, currently with manpower issues, the current bank can only be held to 20 hours. After 20 hours, they lose the time. So with the current manpower staffing issues, guys are being denied their flex time because of manpower, but then their time is being lost. So what we're asking is that that bank be pushed up to 50 hours so that would allow the supervisors greater discretion under the scheduling conundrum, so to speak, that we have, and that way officers would not lose their time. Now, prior to the current standard, and I'm not sure if this occurred when you were here or not, Chief Brooks, but the department had asked us to go to 40 hours on that flex bank because of scheduling. They couldn't accommodate it, and the SWAT team said, yeah, that's fine. And so the flowing of that bank time, I think, is something that can be flexible, but since it's a contractual item, we're asking to up that, knowing that at 50 hours, if you can't get the time off, you're going to lose it. And I think that's acceptable to our team.
I might be missing something, but so this is time related to flex time so that this unit specifically can meet the prescribed physical fitness test. So how do you bank your gym hours? Like, for
So-
example, if I work out 3 times a week and I can't get there, can I just do it one day at the end of the month? I'm not sure I'm following.
Okay, so currently, the way the grievance read from 28 years ago and the way it's written is officers are required to take a quarterly fitness test. As a result, the department and the city has agreed to allow them compensation for their time to stay fit at 10 hours a month. So the way the system works is officers are required to weekly log their workout times and durations and dates and all that kind of stuff. And so the supervisors we physically turn in a report that says, Monday I did an hour of this and Tuesday I did that. And so that's part of the requirement for the time off, is that that's being met and that they keep testing 4 times a year. If they don't test 4 times a year, it's subject to removal. If they don't log their stuff, it's subject to removal. So it's 10 hours a month, as you well know, is not a lot of fitness time to stay stay in shape. So it's a fraction of the amount of time those guys use or put into that effort. And but we, like I said, the biggest concern that we have right now is the bank. And we understand that even though it was in comp time with the grievance, that causes some issues. And so the team was willing to push that into the flex side, and that got in the last contract because of that. And it's really just a matter of the hours. Guys are losing their time because of our scheduling issues due to manpower. And so they're unable to do it and they're losing it. So we're looking to push that bank just to make them able to use that time off.
I'm sorry, are they using the time off because they're banking it and not for working out, which was probably the basis of the grievance? I'm just missing something in here.
Okay, sorry, maybe I'm not
Oh, sure.
explaining it properly.
I mean, what I
so
want to
what-
make sure.
So what it is guys work a 40-hour week. Outside of that 40-hour week.
Guys
I'm
or
sorry,
women.
sorry.
Yes.
My
Yes.
members and officers, sorry, work, they work 40 hours a week. And then they're required to work out in addition to that. And so it's additional time, I guess. And so the grievance was where that time should go. And so the grievance, the hearing officer said it could be used as comp time. And so that's where that morphed to, and this is where we ended up. And so I don't know if that answers your question or not.
What I'm wondering is if this benefit is being used differently because of the scheduling issues than was originally intended. So if this is time to make sure that people have the opportunity to ensure they pass the physical fitness exam, has it now morphed into a bank of time off for officers just to sort this out in whatever way they can with their schedules? Because at one point, this benefit must have been aligned with the actual physical activity. So I guess, is it because the scheduling issues are preventing officers from logging this time to work out? I'm just not
Okay.
quite, because sometimes over time in these contracts, the original intent of a benefit morphs into something that's being used slightly different, which is fine.
Sure.
I'm just trying to understand how it's different.
So the original intent was for officers that are required to work out, they would be compensated for that time. That time was originally designated as comp time so that officers could use that as leave. Over the course of time, it has turned into a flex time. And in that flex time, we currently have a 20-hour bank that officers are allowed to bank time in. And because it's flex, it's manpower dependent. Okay, so they're not going to pay somebody overtime for the flex. So what guys do is over the course of the month, they spend their hours and time off duty working out, and then they put it on their timesheet and it goes in as a flex into this flex bank account. And then when they go to use it, it has to be there. The goal is for it to be used the month that it was earned in, and if not, the month that was after. And so with the scheduling shortages, officers are asking to flex off days, and their supervisors are advising that they're unable to because of manpower. So once it goes to 20, it falls off the table. And so what we're asking is that we increase that bank to 50. That way supervisors can manage that a little better and guys won't lose the time that their flex time.
So I have a couple questions.
Okay.
How many active members of SOU do we have?
Currently there's 20.
20?
That includes the lieutenant and the sergeants.
Okay, so less that are covered by this CLA.
Correct. So it wouldn't apply to the lieutenant or the captain. It would just apply to the sergeants and the officers.
Okay, so we're looking at 19 then?
Yeah,
Is that
somewhere
what
around
you-
19.
And is the current testing standard still 4 times a year? Are they being tested 4 times a year right now?
Yes.
And you mentioned the logs. I've never seen one. Who do those go to?
So I
And
can,
where are they?
okay, currently they're on the iDrive under the special operations folder. And I believe the subfolder is fitness, but the procedurally, the sergeant, they're sent to the sergeant, the respective sergeants to monitor and log, and then the lieutenant is doing checkups on that is the procedure for that. And so they should be on the iDrive.
And then the last question I have, because I wasn't here when this was negotiated, was there ever talk of just allowing SOU members time to work out on duty so that they didn't need to flex, nor did it require backfilling additional positions?
So I don't know the original conversations related to it. I know that Teresa probably has the grievance that was filed about 28 years ago, the hearing summary or findings. I don't know how it was originally negotiated. I think that if the organization had something in mind that was different and flexible, that I think the team would probably be okay with that. It's just however that looks and the best way for the organization, I think we have some flexibility in there. And so that's a potential, but this is kind of how it's always been in the contract. And so we're just trying to alleviate some headaches from what's currently happening.
Understood. I was trying to get some historical
Yeah.
perspective because I know sometimes they
Yes.
have had those types of conversations. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I think on the proposal side, that's where we're at for today, and that provides what we're looking at on the compensatory side.
Okay, just so I'm clear, is there a proposal 7 or is that being scrapped?
I think we're scratching 7, and plus it just, we had to stay in line with last couple. So yeah, we've scratched 7, and so 7 is not going to be forthcoming.
Okay, and this is all of the union's economic proposals?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it's now the city's turn.
All right, so this is the city's response to a proposal from the union at the last meeting regarding the COVID mandate, and the city has rejected that proposal.
So the current MOU, you don't want to I'm just make sure I'm clear because it really wasn't a proposal. We just don't want to memorialize it going forward is the conversation.
Correct. But just to be clear, the city currently has no intention of implementing a policy on the current workforce moving forward. And because of that and the need for flexibility in this space, we're not interested in moving forward. But I do want to make it clear, it's not because we have any current intentions in this space.
Okay, thank you.
I've just uploaded the city's proposal 10 regarding language for workers' compensation, and this is just to provide clarity to the current practices and make the language consistent with workers' compensation laws. And you'll see the red line version on the proposal. Were there any questions, or did you want me to move on?
I just finished reading it real
Okay.
quick.
I'm sorry.
I don't think we have any questions at this time.
Okay, I just uploaded the city's response to a counter proposal from the union regarding the removal of disciplinary language concerning missed court. And the city is rejecting the counter proposal in large part due to current existing language that's already in the CLA that is noted in the additional information section of this counter proposal. So it already covers, I think, the majority of what was listed in the counter proposal.
We don't have any questions.
And I just uploaded the city's response to a union counter proposal regarding the time limits to fill a vacant position. And the city's response is that we would like to just continue using the existing language in the CLA as it exists now with the new extension or the new date of 90 days versus 30.
Okay, thank you.
I just uploaded the city's response to the union proposal. This is something we've gone back and forth with on the corporal position. At the last meeting, the union brought forward some, in the counter proposal, some language changes. We've just made some minor tweaks to that, just to kind of clarify that. So hopefully it's in line with what you were thinking there as well. Removing, like you had mentioned before, the definitive timeline of October 1st of 2023, but just kind of cleaning up some of the language specifically relating to the union's involvement in the committee in looking at what the corporal position looks like.
Okay, thank you.
And the final one that I'm uploading right now is the city's response to the union proposal regarding the grievance timeline. The union had requested to increase the number of calendar days from 32 to 45, and the city rejects that offer.
We don't have any questions on that.
And that's all the city had brought forward today.
So I think what we'd like to do, unless there objection, is for the city to take the lunch break to do some time estimates on how long it will take our team to come back with the financial implications of your proposals. We will not be able to do that today. I'm wondering if we're even going to be able to make our next meeting, which is Monday. So we're just going to take the time during lunch to figure out the scheduling considerations, and then we'll return after lunch with some sort of proposal in that space. Because I'm not sure we're going to be productive without the actual economic impact of your proposals.
Yeah, after, and we, just to let you guys know, we have a couple counter proposals when we come back from lunch that we'll provide.
Sounds good. Thank you. We will be adjourned until 1 o'clock. All right, we are back. If it's okay, I'd like to propose some schedule adjustments before you get into the counter proposals. So the city would like to propose reducing our calendar hold on August 8th that I think is currently 9 to 5. Shorten that from 9 to 12, and our intent in that will be to address the issues that are non-economic related. And then give Biff and the team some more time to get the numbers together on your economic proposals and return on the 24th from 8:30 to 11. If my memory serves me correct, you all prefer Wednesdays, so that's what I attempted to do in alignment with the schedules. It's not an intentional delay. It's just what was open. We also have a challenge finding a room that can live stream and have all the folks we need to make that work. So the first was to reduce August 8th instead of 9 to 5 to 9 to 12 to continue bargaining over the non-economic issues. And then to return on August 24th from 8:30 to 11 to have the city continue the conversation with the economics.
I think that that schedule would work for our side, so we appreciate that.
Just to confirm, you're saying 8:30 though, instead of 9.
Correct. That is indicative of some of the room challenges we're having. So our intention is to keep these meetings here. In the event we can't move the folks, I'm going to attempt to, we will, the next best place, which you all probably know more than I do for streaming, might be City Hall West, but we'll let you know if we have to find a different location.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
We had a couple counter proposals that we will move in. So I dropped it in the union proposals for today. It's a counter proposal for annual druthers. And I guess the original intent, Chief, that you had described was some scheduling issues. The union rejects that proposal and that offer. We understand that the new timesheet system will help with some of the druthering issues. And the union body is not interested in doing 6-month rotations that are selected once a year. The next is going to be the civil service rules, which in its current form, the union is rejecting. And I think we need to have some conversation to figure out a little more where the department is going with that so that we can have a better understanding. We met, I think it was about a year ago. Adam was present, or at least on Zoom, he was present, related to civil service rules, at which time the department was interested in putting them into policy. We just had a discussion related to them being part of the contract as an MOU. And so we are, we kind of have the concept that we need to figure out where all this stuff is going. And so you removed a lot of things that were in the civil service rules on your proposal, but we don't really have any understanding of what the department's intent is, where those things are going, how that really looks going forward. And I think it probably warrants a conversation versus us having a written proposal that includes things that you have a different plan for. And maybe if we can understand really how that, we want that to look going forward, and then we can maybe find some common ground. And that way we're not wasting time going back and forth with stuff that is not going to work. So I don't know if you have conversation that can be had today related to it, but I mean, I think this is a another extremely critical issue for the membership. And so instead of, going back and forth over the course of weeks, if we'd have a conversation, maybe kind of get to a general understanding, then we can maybe start putting some things in writing on either side.
Yeah, I think we'll need to break this document down into smaller bite-sized pieces and kind of tackle each one, because I think there's different nuances to all of them.
So is it the department's intent to put pieces in the contract and pieces in policy, or they're all going to go into policy, or how, I guess we're kind of confused.
Well, I think without going through this line by line, much of this is currently already in the CLA. And I think that was some of the issue is it was redundant in here. I think some of it can be covered in policy. And then there was some stuff that we had put in here, if I recall correctly, that we were recommending putting into the CLA as well.
So I think our intent is that we create something in the CLA, which we've referred to as general orders for lack of a better term, which the other emergency services group that the city is in negotiation with utilizes that term, in which those orders can be set over there regarding most of these items that can be removed with a mutual understanding, or they can be revamped or flexibly applied or pulled out to change with the reform and or the modernization of our organization, where they're not in policy, where it's flexible for one part, which is the department's part, but not flexible on our part. And so in fact, a year ago, we brought that to the attention. I know you weren't in the room then, but other members of the administration were, and Adam was on Zoom. And we basically said, we want these in general orders, and that way they can be pulled out, fixed, cleaned up, adjusted as needed without reopening the collective labor agreement. And that provides both sides the most flexibility. And so that's kind of our intent. And without really knowing whether that's something that we can proceed down or not, I mean, that's kind of where we're standing.
Yeah, and I'll have to do a little bit of research. My understanding was that the city was not looking to create additional general orders, but either working through policy or formal documentation within the CLA.
Yeah, that is correct. The city didn't want to go down the route of creating general orders for the police. I think from our perspective, some of these items were more appropriate for the contract. Some of them seemed more appropriate for policy. And then there were a few items that really didn't seem to impact the bargaining unit at all. There were non-bargaining unit positions that we felt that, they should just be pulled out. So we can have further conversation about where we think things should go. But from our standpoint, I don't think we want to go down the route of creating general orders.
Okay. So I think if we got some kind of information related to where the ones that you want in policy go and where the ones that will go in the CLA will go, then we can kind of start working from our perspective about how we feel those need to, or what kind of common ground we can get on. And that way we can start tackling that problem without, us having no idea and then coming to the table and saying no, and then going back and et cetera.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can do that.
I think that's all of our counter proposals for today.
Okay. Is there anything else we want to address today?
I just had follow up from our first meeting on the city's proposal for the CLA cleanup language. On 4D, you had an objection to the language, but we're going to come up with counter language. Is that still forthcoming?
You're talking about the very first meeting or
Correct.
earlier today?
Nope, first meeting.
Okay, and what section is related to?
4D,
And that's in the,
the CLA cleanup language. It was the only thing that was keeping us from TAing that proposal.
and is that in the city's proposal, or is it somewhere else?
It should be the city's proposal.
The working draft, is it under the working draft?
I believe so. In the July 13th folder, the CLA 2022 working draft.
Okay. So which section is it, Jamie? Sorry.
4D.
So this is the section that you're talking about where it says in order to allow the future lateral transfer of applicants. Is that the section you're talking about? Or you're talking about? Oh, okay, subsection D. Yeah, so that's kind of what this whole conversation is about, is what's going to end up. We wanted to go general orders. Obviously, that's a direction the city's not willing to go. However, we sounds like can probably put some things in the CLA and some things in policy. So I think that's probably best to hold off until that gets resolved related to the civil service and where they track.
Let me just call Allison down the way. Allison, are we up to date on putting our minutes in the folder? I think we are, but that's something we could just administratively confirm that it's up there.
Is it the intent of the city, when you talked about trying to finalize or clean up the rest of the non-economic things, to include the language cleanup, or do you consider that a separate issue? Or should we be prepared to clean that up on the next meeting?
I think we're ready to, if it's possible to clean up, I'm sure we'd all like to get it off the
Okay.
table.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. So just to confirm, we're going to August 8th, we'll cover the rest of the non-economic and the language cleanup. And then on the 24th, hopefully Biff and crew will come back with some numbers and we can meet and discuss it then. We don't have anything else unless you guys do.
No, and just to be clear, on the 24th, I'll be participating virtually that day. So.
It's unacceptable. Okay.
Actually, after this morning, you should say you aspire to participate virtually. All right, I think we're done for the day. Thank you very much.